Liberal MP Andrew Wallace joining me here in the studio. Thanks for your time.
My pleasure, Tom.
It's all about One Nation and what happened with Pauline Hanson. What was your take on the deal that apparently wasn't a deal?
Well, it was. My understanding was it was a deal, and we have been negotiating. My Senate colleagues have been negotiating with Pauline Hanson and One Nation for weeks in order to land an agreed arrangement. Now, there's absolutely no doubt that the government's Senate team were absolutely blindsided yesterday. And this is a great shame. It's a terrible shame, because what it means is that the lawlessness that we've seen going on in the building industry will continue until such time as Pauline Hanson comes to her senses. You know, I've been involved in the building industry for 30 years, Tom, as a carpenter, as a builder, as a construction barrister, and now as a parliamentarian. And I can tell you now that the sort of lawlessness that we're seeing on Queensland building sites, in particular at the hands of the CFMMEU, are very similar to what we saw in the mid-80s with Norm Gallagher and the BLF. Now, back then, Bob Hawke had the intestinal fortitude to deregister the BLF. We wanted to put in place in negotiations with the crossbenchers a satisfactory arrangement that we could see the Registered Organisations Commission take effective action against recidivist unions like the CFMMEU that has received $16.5 million worth of fines. I mean, this is an organisation that treats fines as though it's the cost of doing business.
OK, I want to get into the issue itself in a moment, but just on Pauline Hanson first of all, can you no longer trust her in negotiations?
Well, look, you know, politicians cop a bad cop, you know, at the best of times. But in this place, between politicians, you need to rely on the word of a politician. When they say they're going to support something, then you have to take people at face value, and that's exactly what we did. We'd been negotiating with her for several weeks. We agreed the sort of amendments that she wanted. There was no indication to us that she was not going to pass this bill. So, you know, it's difficult. We'll continue to work with her. I know that the Attorney and the Prime Minister is very, very keen to ensure this bill passes. So we'll continue to work with her.
But what does it say then? You say continue to work with her, but you're saying in this building you need to take people at their word, and you're also saying that you had her word and she backed down on it. Doesn't that mean she's not reliable? She has got a serious credibility problem, not just with us, but with the Australian people. We wanted to pass legislation yesterday that will see recidivist union groups be dealt with according to law. Now, be dealt with, in this case, by the federal court for egregious offences. They would be deregistered. Let's talk about the legislation itself. All the reasons you've mentioned there are to do with the CFMMEU. Is that what the bill's about? Just getting that union?
No, it's not. It's about ensuring that all unions act in accordance with...
But do any other unions have a track record that is anywhere near the CFMMEU, or do any of them have problems that you think they should be deregistered?
Look, the most serious recidivist union, there is absolutely no doubt in Australia, is the CFM.
But is there any other union you'd point to?
Look, the ETU aren't exactly without fault, but apart from that, I would say, look, this is not a matter of union bashing. Just let me finish this. This is not a matter of union bashing. There is a place for unions in this country. The unions form and perform a very, very important role in our community. I'll be the first one to stand up and say that. This is about ensuring that unions or union delegates, officials, don't go around bullying, intimidating. Tom, I have been approached. I've been approached by public servants in Queensland from the Workplace Health and Safety organisation there that administer workplace health and safety on building sites. They are afraid to go on to some building sites because they themselves are being bullied by the CFM.
Okay, and I know that you've got a problem with that union, but when you say the ETU, are there
people from the ETU that should be taken off the union as well?
There's no particular person in the ETU. I know that the ETU caused all sorts of problems on the construction side of the Sunshine Coast University.
Do you think if this were in place that it would be in danger of being deregistered, and would that be a good result?
No, look, the issue of deregistration of unions only applies in the most egregious of cases, and it's not a decision that's made politically.
No, but the trigger point is a relatively low one. It can be a relatively low one. It's up to the court to actually make that deregistering decision.
It's up to the Registered Organisations Commission to bring the complaint in the first instance.
To refer it to the court.
To refer it to the court.
So just on that point, because this week a court has found that the Registered Organisations Commission launched an invalid investigation into the AWU. Is that a problem for its credibility?
Look, as an administrative lawyer, I can tell you, Tom, that these sorts of things go on all the time.
What do invalid investigations?
No, well, I mean, it's a matter of an administrative law, and I don't know the particular circumstances of that case, but certainly investigations are ruled invalid by all manner of government departments, state, federal. That's just par for the course. So I don't.
But I want to talk about this because this is important. The ROC is the organisation that can refer any union or union member to the federal court. Now, even if the court doesn't deregister that union member or that union, they're going through a legal process. That's a significant impost on them. The concern is if they're making invalid investigations, they might just go after unions and refer to them to the courts and get them tied up in the legal process.
You can't draw an inference from one instance that therefore a regulator is acting outside the law.
This is its biggest investigation, though, and it's been ruled invalid.
I don't think you can draw that comparison.
Is it troubling at all that it's been ruled invalid?
From an administrative lawyer's perspective, these things happen all the time. What's important is that the decision-making body will be the federal court. The federal court will determine whether a union organiser should be disqualified or a union should be deregistered. Now, there's absolutely no doubt that these are things that will be that would occur only in the most egregious of cases. Now, the Labor Party have been coming out and saying, someone could be a union could be deregistered, someone could be disqualified on the basis of 3 paperwork errors. That's absolutely
no, but rubbish. They could be referred.
There's a big difference between a referral and the court action.
Sure, but there's also quite an impost to being referred, having to go through a court process and being tied up for things for a couple of years.
You look at what the person that refers the most in this place is Mark Dreyfus, the Shadow Attorney General.
No one's ended up in court over that.
That is an exceptional point. 0 for 9. On not one occasion has the Shadow Attorney General...
But you get the point that it's... When you just say, well, the court's still got to make the decision, it still is an impost on someone, and it could be a big impost on a union if members are constantly referred off to a court.
But, Tom, the issue that... the Pauline Hanson agreed to a framework, and she went back on that. Now, as far as we were concerned, we had an agreement from Pauline Hanson and One Nation Party that we had given significant ground on making a number of amendments. The parties were in agreement.
I understand that, and we covered that territory. But the union itself, why not just seek to deregister the CFM-MEU?
Well, that is a matter ultimately for the federal court. What this legislation does is it certainly puts flesh on the bones about how that would be done and in what circumstances it would be done. And it would only be done in the most egregious of circumstances where there is continued recidivism. Now, look, this legislation gave the CFM-MEU an opportunity to wipe the slate clean and start again, in effect. This legislation didn't operate retrospectively.
Is that the hope for you, that if legislation passes, ultimately the union is deregistered, it ceases to exist?
My hope is that the CFM-MEU will see the error of its ways and will operate within the confines of the law. And
given though in Victoria,
just let me finish this. The CFM-MEU operates on receiving money from its members. But for the money that it receives from its members weekly in their pay packets,
it's like
the CFM-MEU wouldn't exist.
Sure.
So the CFMMEU have an obligation to their members to operate within the confines of the law.
Given in Victoria, for all of John Setker's rap sheet, and it's an extensive one, he still enjoys strong support. Is that hope that you've got, that they'll see the error of their ways a realistic one?
Well, look, just on that point alone, Jackie Lambie has said time and time again that if John Setker was still at the helm by the time this bill was debated, she'd support the bill, and hasn't. So that's another credibility issue for Jackie Lambie. But insofar as John Setker being at the helm of the CFMMEU, that's a matter for the CFMMEU.
I understand it is, but you're also talking about legislation that could mean that the union is deregistered. Would that be a good result? If that, considering they can continue to back him in and the strength of criticism the coalition's had for him, wouldn't you say, let's get this passed and we hope that union does go?
I am not sitting here today with you saying that the CFMMEU must be deregistered. What I'm sitting here and saying is that this bill should be passed to, in effect, put a structure in place that will ensure integrity in the building industry. It will ensure integrity of unions.
All right.
I'm not asking anything more than what a company director should have to comply with.